Hello, everyone. My name's Chris Mills, and I'm going to be chairing today's session. Today's session is around supporting local authorities on their journey with simpler recycling. And this session's got a particular focus around rerouting of collection rounds. And essentially, this is a gateway to further engagement and sharing of insights that Defra wants to have. In terms of the session, we're recording today's session. We've kept mics and cameras off for attendees. We have a question and answer function, so I would encourage you to use that throughout this session, particularly if just something comes to mind, so that we can line those questions up early. We won't necessarily be answering questions on wider policy issues, so please focus on the topic itself. We've built in plenty of time for discussion through the questions with our panel. And in terms of the agenda, today's session's really structured to give you an overview of rerouting, share some industry insights to help local authorities with the next steps. So in the first part, we'll give you a bit of a background to the Change Network. Then there'll be a section around the topic for today, which is really around the issues, what good practice really looks like. Then we're going to get the perspective of our local authority champion and ask them to share their thoughts and experiences. And then we're going to open it up to further discussion. So as I say, please use the Q&A function to send questions in. The latter part of the session is where we'll talk about where all the key documents and further information is stored and how to continue sharing of insights. So we'd also like you to complete a short feedback form, and this is purely used to help refine the support to other stakeholders. We're going to finish within the hour, but obviously we want to continue the conversation thereafter. So maybe we just briefly explain what a change network means. And essentially, this is around an extended team of people across the impacted business area, in this case, local authorities, with simpler recycling. And champions are essentially like trusted members of the business area that can influence other stakeholders and provide that key understanding of the key changes and can help, inform change readiness and how some of these insights can be used. At government, we recognise the scale of the change and the challenges and the need to work across multiple organisation boundaries. And so for this reason, Defra has created this change network to prepare for the household collection requirements that take place from next March. So essentially, this is about using the wide range of experience and insights that exist out in the field in order to help get the right messages and right support to local authorities and stakeholders. And to do that, we need a network that's really focused on change. Now, all of the research on change management tells us that many people feel that they are short on time. They need coaching and support. They need a clear steer from those leading the change, in this case, government. And so the change network's got to address these key points in order to be successful. And so it does that by drawing on the skills and experience of people already working in the affected business area, in this case, local authority champions, sharing their own experiences and learnings around change. And as the slide shows, we've got three main roles for champions. One is around amplifying existing information and good practice that's already out there. Another is around endorsing good practice and sharing those key insights. And a third strand is around helping develop solutions to perhaps longer term challenges. And by approaching it in this way, we're trying to avoid overburdening staff and getting the optimum reach for the messages and the insights that we want to share. So please get in touch if you think you can help with any of these aspects, because we'd really welcome your insights. Now, the Change Network has been developed from extensive readiness testing that Defra has done to understand where local government is at along their simpler recycling journey. And you can see on this slide, there's a range of topics that we're looking at in this first wave. Rerouting that we're talking about today, but also residual waste changes, flats above shops, adding missing materials, work around MRF contract renewal, and going into next year, we'll be looking more closely at emissions trading scheme and local government reorganisation, so as just a few examples. So these sessions have started in November and go well into the new year, and the content of each topic is going to be stored in a hub, more of which we'll talk about later, but that's the store for a lot of the video and the slides and other information. And then just lastly, the role of local authority networks and partners was to help agree the approach that we've taken, to agree the topics and to cascade the network to their membership. So please do get in touch with your LA representative body if you think that there are further areas of support that are needed, or you want to get involved and help as a champion. Now what I'm going to do is hand over to Dan Roberts from RAP, who's a specialist at RAP, who's going to give an overview of today's key topic. So over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. As Chris said, my name is Dan Roberts. I'm a specialist at RAP in the Policy and Insights team. Excuse me. I've also spent time in local government implementing new services, which have included rerouting. Next slide, please. So when we're referring to rerouting or route optimization, quite an interchangeable term, what are we talking about? It's effectively the design and implementation of waste and recycling collection rounds, ensuring that they're appropriate, they're feasible, they're safe, they're efficient. And the extent of the task for local authorities will depend largely on your starting point. So is it a case of the rounds are quite up to date and you're adding a new service on, such as a food waste collection, or actually have the rounds been in place for a long time and requiring a bit more of a holistic review? And the reason this is so important and why we're talking about this is it's a really high profile element of a service change. So actually a lot of work could have gone in to plan a service, to implement. Actually, if on the first day the vehicle doesn't reach the curbside, it's a significant risk politically, reputationally, and it can lead to disengagement from residents very quickly. So it's a really important part. It's one of the last tasks in terms of implementation, but the planning of this can start much earlier. Historically, it was cost savings and round efficiencies that drove the process. But we've got some examples to share with you about how the information can be used for much more holistic purposes, both strategic and operational. One of the key themes that's going to come through from this, hopefully, is the requirement to plan early. It is never too early to start planning this, and we've got some good examples to share with you. And such is the prominence and the need for this to be done and done well is included as part of the new burdens funding from Defra for authorities in England to roll out food waste collections. Next slide, please, Chris. Thank you. And as I mentioned, in terms of what good practice looks like, it's the strategic and operational benefits of having a consistent, accurate data set go well beyond rerouting, route optimization, and collection rounds. So, for example, it's the chance to relay live service information. Now, whether that's through your contact centres or direct to your residents through self-service, it enables missed bin reports to be dealt with efficiently. It links to online collection calendars. So instead of having separate databases and systems that require different care and attention, it's one source of information that you know you can trust. And when it comes to collection rounds operationally, actually in terms of if a vehicle breaks down, for example, you can use the information to reallocate work, effectively lift it from one round and onto another. And what happens is all the underlying information, be it assisted collections, any quirks, other quirks in collection, any round risk assessments, any crew identifying notes, anything like that, it can be brought across to make sure that actually the work can be completed and completed well. It does enhance the resilience of services. You're not dependent on crew knowledge alone, although obviously crew input is vital. And it enables more targeted interventions. The example we've given here is identifying contamination. So it may well be a case of if a property is continually contaminating or presenting excess waste next to the residual bin, the data that comes from this enables you to target education and information in a much more granular way. It can also support other service changes and help mobilize. The example here is container distribution. And this is really important, particularly if you're engaging with distribution companies to roll this out, who might be less familiar with the area. It's essential that it's underpinned by really good quality data. For EPR, it can help you demonstrate the efficiency and effectiveness of your services. And for health and safety, it enables you to embed health and safety in your round design. It isn't a case of you design the rounds and then you bolt on time-banded collections, single-sided collections, or route risk assessments. They can form part of the service from the outset, and also any written assessments that may be required for co-collection. And finally, to future-proof your services, if you need to run scenario modelling on future contract location of depots, perhaps what impact a DRS scheme will have on collection rounds, you've got a quality data set on which you can base your future decisions. Next slide, please, Chris. And we've already touched on data, and I'm not going to go through all of this in detail. This is not an exhaustive list. But when it comes to developing and accessing the data that you need, it really is a case of the more data that you can obtain, the more bespoke it can be to your authority, the more chance that the outputs, the rounds, and what is delivered is reflective of your local authority and your services. So consider your LLPG, your local land property gazetteer, and the property information. Is it specific to a waste and recycling collection service? It may be used for other purposes. Can you identify the nuances in your collection, perhaps where you've got hard to reach or narrow access properties? Have you recorded the variables around the current and your future service, the frequency of collections, the containers that are used when collections are done? Consider your yields. How much are you collecting and what are your participation rates? Again, this is really crucial for some of your waste streams in terms of identifying what resource you'll need. What about any timings or tipping locations? As an example, for tipping locations, there may be restrictions. It may not be the case that you can use all sites on all days at all times. If you know that there are restrictions in how you can operate your collection service, that really needs to be built in early on, or it will not reflect truly what your service looks like. And more information on additional containers. Where are they? If they're all located in one side of your district or assisted collections, your service again spatially needs to reflect this. And again, as I mentioned previously, building in these round risk assessments, assisted collections, and just making sure that actually what you're collecting, what you're using, is the most accurate you can do. So ask yourself, be really honest at the early stage. What information do you have? Is it accurate? If not, what do you need to do to make it accurate? You can start working on this as soon as possible. And also ask yourself, how will that data be updated? Because the moment this is accurately recorded and done on a Friday afternoon, 10 new properties request bins on the Monday morning, it's already out of date. So be realistic about how often and how this will be updated. And source your information widely, be it RAP reports, tools such as the curbside costing tool, from software providers or LAs and LA networks. There's a wealth of information. So please do seek that out. Next slide, please, Chris. So last couple of slides from me. The do's, again, not exhaustive, headline do's. Have a think about how will this be done. Are you going to do this in-house or will this be outsourced to a provider? And it links to point 2 around your requirements and the resource you have available. Will this be a one-off ask? Will it be a case of designing rounds and implementing? Actually, if it's going to be longer term, what skills do you have? What skills do you need in your organization? And talk to providers, engage with them. Is your ask realistic? Be aware that for food waste collections, there's a significant number of councils rolling out this service over the coming months. So their availability is going to be crucial. Do ask yourself how this is going to integrate with other systems as mentioned there. Will it be a standalone route optimization and route planning system, or will it link to your in-cab software, your CRMs, and any telematics you have? Because that's really, really crucial from the outset that you know those systems can integrate. Do engage with all stakeholders. Again, that list there will be incomplete, but internally there are a number of internal colleagues within the local authority you need to speak to, such as the procurement team, ICT, fleet, legal, HR, and the communications team. Elected members, really important they understand the scale of this. If you are looking to change collection days on a wide scale, make sure they're aware of that from the outset and assure them that actually what's going to be done to make sure that this is delivered seamlessly. And if you're a waste collection authority, please do engage with your waste disposal authority. If there are restrictions at tipping locations, again, this needs to be understood now and in the future. It may be you can speak with other local authorities, neighbouring authorities, not necessarily to plan routes around that, but there might be a conversation around shared infrastructure, or even around if you are going to license software, perhaps you can club together with other authorities to do this collectively. There are real benefits for this from a shared learning and a training perspective, or even a collection contractor. In many cases, we see that the collection contractor is often tasked with implementing rounds, which is appropriate, but ask yourself as an authority how much information you want to retain and understand about your services for the requirements as mentioned on the previous slide. Leave some time in to review and recalibrate your data. These rounds are not going to work perfectly on day one. You can do a certain amount of testing, but until it engages in the real world, you won't know for sure. So make sure there's enough time to review and have a look and change those rounds as necessary. Hopefully it shouldn't be wholesale changes, but just to make sure that actually this is working for you. And as mentioned, do use this data for an evidence-led operational strategic decisions. There's some real value in making sure this is used appropriately. Next slide, please, Chris, and the last one from me. So in summary, don't underestimate the time that's required. Again, you can start very early gathering some of this data, even if you don't know what your final requirement is or the software you'll use or how you'll use it. You can start to look for this information and gather it from all sources. It's advised not to see this as an isolated project for all the reasons said. What you don't want is multiple data sets that require continual updates being used for different purposes. Putting that effort and that time in now to make sure it's used for all those reasons will really pay dividends. And don't assume that the existing data you have is accurate and specific to waste services, particularly the LLPG data. Again, this is serving a number of council purposes. You have to make sure that this is suitable for your services and projects that data into the system. Do involve your collection crews. Don't forget to involve them. The crew knowledge should complement this software. The crews will have an immense amount of knowledge of the area, and you want to involve them early on so that they're assured how this system will work, but also the benefits of it. The fact that it will deliver a safer, more balanced collection rounds, where all the variables that they understand will be built into it, again, should be really helpful to them. So do involve them early. And don't forget to use all the available resources and guidance. I've mentioned a few sources from RAP. There's a lot of data out there that you can use to really make sure that this is as accurate for you as can be and can serve you well. And just to finish up, we have worked on some route optimization guidance at RAP. We'll be publishing that shortly, which again will give you some more pointers, help and information on how to approach this and how to procure services if you so wish. So that's a very quick run through from me, Chris. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. That was a really good summary. Particularly in the do's and don'ts, there's lots of good takeaways. I'll reiterate all of the slides and content from today will be available. But I was just taking notes as we're going. I clearly heard things around early planning and don't underestimate the time. The importance of data and sourcing good quality data and checking through that. You mentioned quite a few times around speaking to teams internally to get those different perspectives and that range of experience. And then the other thing was around, looking at these things holistically, not the services in isolation, because they seem to influence each other. Right, we're going to come back to Dan, but next I'm going to introduce Mark Christie from West Suffolk District Council to come on as one of our champions who's got a lot of experience in this area. So I'll be asking Mark, do you want to join the call, Mark? Hi, Mark. And
Hi,
if you want to want to introduce yourself and just give a bit of background to your experiences, and particularly if there's anything you picked up in Dan's presentation you want to refer to.
Thanks, Chris. Afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Mark Christie. I'm head of Waste and Streets in West Suffolk Council in Suffolk. It's a pleasure to be here to share some knowledge. We've been on a bit of a long journey in terms of route optimization. I would say probably going back to 2009 when we first started getting into it, and you do learn some very early lessons in terms of how to do this and how you need to collaborate in order to get the best out of it. And I think if I go back right to the beginning, we were complete novice around it. We were still in the school of paper maps and highlight pens, and you used to sit down with the crews and the supervisors and try and draw up a new set of maps to utilize, because a lot of the knowledge was sitting with the crews. And we've picked up on a couple of slides that Dan has pointed out, whereby it's utilizing that knowledge on the ground. So obviously I would definitely advise to get the crews involved at an early stage. They can put some of the practical elements to the theory, which is obviously important because you have to bring the theoretical elements to life as you go through this. One of the things Dan mentioned was how do you start it? Do you do it in-house, or do you go and have a look at a contract with specific skills? We've actually done both. We've done it in-house. We've used contractors. We've also had our cake and ate it and done a bit of both. Obviously, from that perspective, you do get a bit of grief from the finance team when they realise that not only are you actually using licenses for the software, but you're also buying in the expertise as well. I think when we first started, we were fortunate because we had somebody in the IT team who was really keen, and they thought it was fantastic. They were already managing large data sets, GIS, LLPG systems. So for them, managing a routing exercise or getting heavily involved was ideal, and that's what they did. They got heavily involved. They were in essence our embedded expert on routing within the council, and they worked alongside the contractor. Unfortunately, as we find out, if they leave, a lot of the knowledge walks out the door. So you've got to prepare yourself for looking to see what's the best approach to take. But having that in-house, there is the training and support. But the problem that we found when we lost that resource, we couldn't get out of the day job. So the day job just keeps you occupied. We spent a huge amount of time trying to get the data cleansed to make sure it was fit for purpose. So again, there's a lot of effort went into that. And we didn't really have the skills to utilize the software to get the best out of it. So we've now moved to the contractor model where we bring the experts in. We've been using them a long time. They know our business. They know how we work. There's a good level of trust. It's a big leap of faith when a computer spits out loads of collection rounds and you've got to then make it live. And that day one is definitely one of those days that you only want to live once and you want to make sure that you get it right. But getting the team around the table is important. And I think Dan picked out a few people. In terms of, I mentioned the crews and the supervisors and their day-to-day expertise, but equally it's make sure you speak to customer services teams. Those people who deal with the general public, there's going to be a lot of demand coming their way if you don't get the communications right or if there's any errors on day one. You do need a project manager, somebody to keep this on track. Some of the deadlines can spiral if you don't get the scope right. And in particular, it's important that you're clear what the parameters of your project are, because they can go to lots of different directions. IT is an obvious, you do need them, interaction with your own systems. The comms team are vital to get on board early. They're going to try and translate some of the technical jargon that we enjoy using in the waste team and put it into simple messaging for residents. So getting them to understand what the extent of the changes are, who is going to impact, and what the transition is going to be. And the transition is an important element in terms of closing down an old scheme and starting a new scheme. So what are you going to tell your residents? Don't assume that they will know exactly what they have to do. So particularly we had circumstances where we had a lot of residents who were missing a black bin collection because of the way that the sequence changed for their collection week. So we had to understand what that provision needed to be, just to avoid a lot of the noise at the start of the service, because you only get one chance to sort of introduce this once. The other element, just have a chat about, it's relation to the crews. If there's a union, bring the union in. They might have specific issues. Their members will speak to the union. The frontline staff do get a bit freaked out by the change. They've been doing the rounds in a particular way for a long time. But obviously, we're doing it to try and reduce efficiency. We've done it in relation to two councils come together, changing depot locations and locations of tipping points. So all of these factors, we've experienced the use of routing to make sure there's a smooth transition, and it's worked really well in terms of how we do it. The other thing to bear in mind is with the frontline staff, they have got a culture of operation already in place. So it's important that once you've introduced the new services, they don't fall back into the old habits. And this might be that they've been meeting their mate at the burger van on the industrial estates for the last 5 years, and because they're on compatible routes, and it's just breaking some of those habits down, because obviously the new rounds have been set up to be efficient. And I think Dan also just picked up just one final point for me. Dan also picked on about the information that you can build in. So getting that data right at the start is important. When we've done design and spoken to our contractor, it's about building in time for training, for the pre and post vehicle walk around checks, have that built into the day. Definitely the breaks, the time they're going to spend at the tipping locations, making sure that it's a realistic experience, a realistic view of the rounds from the point of view of the modelling. What you don't want to do is be in a position where you're going to do loads of work on modelling, which is going to take a lot of resource and can be very expensive. And then you realise 6 months later, you've got no capacity left because you haven't built in this time that you do need, but also thinking ahead what the future growth might be in housing stock. So there's a few elements where it's worth sticking in. You know, I could talk about this, and you probably don't want to listen to me talk about this for the next 45 minutes, but there's a lot involved, and it's good to speak to other councils who've done it and the providers, and they can guide you. But obviously, I'll pass back to Chris at this stage to see if there's any specific questions.
No, I think that was a really good summary of your real world experience of this, Mark. Just a couple of things to come back on. I really got that point around stressing the importance of getting these numbers right, because they're going to affect how you deliver these really super important frontline services, and the importance of data, not burger van withstanding, but the uniqueness of certain areas and insights, the importance of including breaks, etc., and being sensible. When you've done your calculations for the first time, did you test them? How was the review period? What did that look like?
So once you have your first set of data, the important thing to do is to get your supervisors and crews involved so they can put that real life perspective on it. We've always done that in all the reviews that we've undertaken, and they will highlight the on the ground issues that wouldn't necessarily be identified in a computer model. So they will look into where there's some sensitive locations that don't get picked up, and that might be traffic related. It might be related to, for example, where there may be schools on the route, and so we're trying to move down collection routes at the point at which schools are opening and closing, so they can put that real world element to it. And also, if there's any conflicts on the rounds, where they know that at specific times there's going to be blockages or there's access issues. So they can build that real world in.
Great. And I think you said you started off doing it in-house, you migrated to a consultancy model because of the resource points. But are there any other sort of key essentials, if you were doing this from the beginning again, that you would recommend?
One of the best one is be clear about your data. That is the starting point. It's the first thing that we get asked for as part of this review. So understand where your data is at. Is it complete? Does it include everything? Are you happy with it? If you need to do some work on it and you think it's going to take 3 months to sort it out, probably pick 6 months, because it's a crucial element right at the beginning. If you're going to ask a consultant to come in and support you, just be clear what the scope is. Really understand what you're going to be asking them to do. We've done route modeling for loads of different reasons, and it might be efficiency. It's where, as I mentioned before, 2 councils join it together. It may be where you change in disposal or depot locations. So there's lots of different reasons, and that needs to be built into the scope. And speak with the your contractor or other councils who've done it in relation to what presets you want to use as part of your data. So yields, capture rates, what you think your put-out rate is going to be for those who are going to be using the service, what vehicles are you going to be using. And we've recently done a review for our food waste collection. And as part of that, we identified crew size, looked at start and finish times, identified vehicle sizes. So on our food waste for simpler recycling, we're going to be having a mix of 12-ton and 7.5-ton vehicles. And that's mainly because of the information that came out of the modelling. So it identified, particularly in the urban areas, where you're going to have a lot of bins being emptied, the rural areas where it's sparser. So I think on our residual and recycling collections, we can varies between 1,000 households to 1,700. So you've got all that complication to try and build in, but until you actually do it, you're never going to be 100% sure it's going to work. All you can use is your best endeavors, your experience, speaking with others to make sure that you put in the best level of data, and you'll get the best out of it.
Great. So so definitely I'm hearing a lot around experience, a lot around testing it because of the importance. Right, we're going to go to a question and answer session. So if you have questions, queries that you'd like to ask our experienced panel, please fire them through to the Q&A function. We're going to spend a bit of time on that. We've got some ones that were sent in a little bit earlier we're going to kick off with, but please do fire some questions through to us. Let's start off with the first one, which just a bit of clarity, guys, around do you buy or do you license the tool, particularly in that consultancy approach? And do you need consultancy support on top, or can you do all of the calculations yourself? Mark, maybe you got more recent experience.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we've in the last number we've used a consultancy model. Only because we found it incredibly difficult to free up the resources from the day-to-day job to actually embed themselves into the software and get the best out of it. So we ended up going through a lot of retraining of staff, and the training that we provided was fantastic. It's just that it's difficult to relearn it because you don't. If you get this right, you're not using it on a regular basis. We found that we use it every 2 to 3 years, more specifically because of simpler recycling. There's been more requirement to look at it. So I think our favourite model at the moment is to use that consultancy support. As I mentioned, we've got a good relationship with them, but it's important that you're clear with the consultant exactly what you want and what time scales you want to do it over. If you're resourced up and you're ready for this, then you've got to make sure that your consultant is too, because once you start, it's difficult to put it on the shelf, then come back to it later. There's a bit of momentum that builds up with this.
And are you able to say what software you did use for the rerouting?
Yes, we on all of the systems reviews that we've undertaken, we've used Route Smart, and the outputs. Route Smart is the software that we've used through the consultant that we've used in the past, and we've used that on our own, and we've also used it with the consultant being the lead. And we use for our in-cab system, we use Bartek Collective, so the outputs from Route Smart can be fed into Bartek, and that delivers all the new round information, which we then can test in that system too.
Right. Okay. There's a couple of software mentioned there. Other suppliers are available. At pains to mention. Just both of you, maybe start with Dan. Where you're doing the service in-house, what sorts of staff resources do you need, or tell us about the particular skill sets?
Yeah, I think very quickly, Chris, on Mark's last point around in-house or outsourced to consultants, we've certainly, with the engagement we've done with local authorities and software providers, there has been a bit of a shift towards the consultant side, as Mark has highlighted, and in part because of the requirements of simpler recycling and a case of adding services that authorities, such as food, that authorities haven't done previous. And as Mark said, it is a resource that's required. And I think the reason I was saying about getting data, as cleansed as possible early on is irrespective of who's doing it, whether it's in-house or consultant. There will always be tasks that the consultant can't do without the local authority input. And knowing properties, knowing, as Mark said, the underpinning health and safety aspects, the single-sided collections and things, a consultant wouldn't be able to necessarily, wouldn't know that those practicalities of collection. So when it comes to skills in-house, it is very much the operational of what's happening. It is the ICT skills. It is the GIS, almost the cartography skills, and really having that opportunity to have that as a main task for a period of time. As Mark said, when rolling out service changes, you're effectively closing down an old service potentially if you're making other changes at the same time, and implementing a brand new service. It's easy for this kind of task to almost get put to one side. We'll cleanse that data later. We'll look at this later. There's a chance to do this up front. It doesn't have to wait. It's not necessarily part of a sequence. So I'd say, Chris, in terms of the skill set, it's obtaining everything operationally that's possible to gather that information so that whoever then takes that forward, be it licensed software that you run yourself, whether you bring in consultants, you can go forward with confidence that the data you've got is truly reflective of what your service is, and there's going to be no nasty surprises later.
Right. Okay. One for both of you. How long would a typical rerouting exercise take from start to finish? Mark, could you give perspective?
Yeah, it really does depend on what you're looking at. We've recently undertaken a review of our residual recycling and food waste collection rounds. We've done a big bang scenario with that because we wanted to maintain a single collection day for residents. So we didn't want to do them in isolation. So we currently have a garden waste subscription service that is completely separate. So undertaking a remodeling of that service might take, and I'm talking subject to when your data is ready to hand off. You're probably talking about a month if the contract is available, but we've probably spent about 3 months in terms of the food residual and recycling review, which we're currently undertaking at the moment. So just build that time in. You've got to find out when the contract is going to be available, but it's all dependent upon your data being clean enough, of good quality, and in the right format to hand off, because they can't really do any work on your behalf until they have that.
And Dan, any thoughts from you on timescales?
Yeah, I think 3 months is fair, as Mark said, and I think that's a case of that's assuming the data is in a relatively good place. I think also, again, as we've mentioned, if it's a case of adding a new service which is relatively, if not standalone in the sense of waste and recycling collection, if that's the only aspect of the service that you're potentially looking to change, then 3 months with dedicated resource, proficient resource, with that support that's been mentioned is feasible. I think if you're starting from scratch, and Mark mentioned the sort of the paper rounds and the schedules, if it's not digitized in that way, and there are some significant changes. If you're looking to change, for example, your residual collection service, if you're changing dry recycling, food waste, and there are other aspects, Chris, to bring in terms of you have a waste disposal authority, you need to understand potential restrictions. There are other contractual issues at play. To bring all of that together from almost, starting from scratch, I'd say it's nearer 6 months. I don't know what Mark thinks of that, but I don't think 6 months is out of the question if you're still trying to manage other aspects of a service change of that scale.
Yeah, just if I can come in on this one,
please.
It does depend what you're changing. So, for example, we've done a routing exercise, and part of it was just change terms and conditions for staff, which was on a 12-week consultation period. So you've got to build in all this specific time to make sure that you're going through the right process. And the staff who are going to be delivering these rounds, it's important that they're on board from day one. They understand the reasons for the change. Depends on what sort of collection culture you currently have, whether you use task and finish, or if you've got a different orientation that you follow. It's important that you build in time for all of these different factors as you run through.
Great. We've got a question in the chat around essentially around when you did the analysis of the rerouting exercise, Mark, and was this pre-council merger or after council merger? And broaden this out, Dan, do you think, in terms of more councils merging together, this is an important time to consider rerouting?
In terms of our initial routing exercise, we were wanting to work closest to, so we're still two separate councils, but it is a operational team. We're working on a much closer level. So in that sense, we're using the same facilities and disposal points as we were previously, but there were opportunities to improve the routing and the efficiency across some of the border areas between the two districts. We've also undertaken a routing exercise which involved a change to the number of depots we have. So reduced from 3 depots to 2 depots, and at the same time, the disposal point transfer station also changed. So there's an opportunity there to look at potential savings, but also understand what the routing implication was for ongoing budgets. And equally, we've also used routing from another sense in terms of either business cases or equally to look at the impact of one particular tipping point closing down. And we were able to identify that was going to have a significant impact on our resources because we would have had longer running times to the tip. So we've used it for various different reasons. Some of it's been at a council or district level, some of it's been looking at specific waste streams, for example, garden waste, where we introduced a different work pattern for the service, or for simply recycling, where we're doing a big bang change across all of our area, including week changes to the sequence, but also day changes for residents.
Yeah.
Any thoughts to add from you, Dan?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I think just to add that in terms of local government reorganisation, I think again some of the changes that we'll see in the future aren't solely predicated on waste and recycling collection services, but it's a case of setting out fair expectations that sometimes it might sound that actually by amalgamating local authorities there might be opportunities to rationalise the rounds, to make them more balanced, to make them more efficient. I think sometimes, and speaking from personal experience, it's a good chance to use the software, as Mark has said, to really demonstrate what's achievable. And by that, I mean, working at a local authority previously that was quite rural, quite sparsely populated, any boundary changes, any changes at the borders actually might not yield the efficiencies that might automatically spring to mind. So I think it's around looking at this and saying, actually, yeah, is there a case of using depots in a different way, or facilities or tipping points? Again, I've used this previously where the principal tipping point changed and it required a really significant change to collection days and zones to make sure that, do you want crews operating in the same area? Do you want them all leaving and coming back to base at the same time, or do you want it staggered? So I think these are all things that, in terms of any local authority restructures, it's a really good opportunity to model this first, and again set those expectations fairly, that it won't automatically mean that rounds are going to change, that there'll be these efficiencies. All the practicalities we've mentioned today need to be played into that. So yeah, the softwares can be incredibly powerful for that.
Okay, just thinking about some of the outputs and things that you've seen, it might be useful for the audience to hear about what impact do you think that changing services like residual waste are going to have on the food waste or dry recyclable rounds?
Is that for me, Chris, or for Mark?
Maybe let's start with Dan, just what you've seen more broadly.
I think that, and RAP's done a lot of research on this in terms of impacts, that it very much depends by authority to authority. So I think if any restrictions to residual waste, be it capacity or frequency, what we tend to see is that the participation in food waste collection services, participation in dry recycling schemes, organic recycling schemes, and the yields that come from that, Chris, tend to increase. And as a result of that, the round size that's achievable tends to reduce. So you need to plan and ensure that if you are implementing a service change, there will be a knock-on impact of these variables. And it can vary by authority to authority. It very much depends where you're starting from, what you're changing, aspects such as how well it's communicated, how well you mobilize that change. But by and large, if residual is restricted or changes in some way, your food and dry rounds will generally get smaller because you'll have more people using the service. So you just need to make sure, again, that when you're planning the parameters, as Mark said, like yields and participation, set out rates, you're doing so based on the best available evidence specific to your authority.
Just a plug for any more questions, because we've got a few minutes left. So if any more, otherwise we'll use the pre-submitted ones. Mark, was that your experience of residual waste? How you looked at that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've just got to be clear what you're trying to achieve. I think we've introduced changes to food waste, recycling, and residual on the basis that we wanted to make sure we have a single collection day for our residents for those services, rather than having different collection days during the week. So we had to align the services, and the round sizes are very much different. So, for example, the average of our food waste rounds that we're going to be implementing next year is about 1,700 households, right, whereas with the residual collections, it's probably down to about 1,000, 1,200 households. Right. So there are differences. So we have aligning the resources to the changes that we need. It's important. But if you want to keep that single collection day, we found it easier to analyze all the different services together as opposed to doing them separately.
And just probing a bit further, Mark, on your food waste rounds, did they include liners or a liner supply? Did that impact the round sizes?
These aren't operational yet. So as I mentioned earlier, we're still in the theory phase.
All right.
When they are introduced next year, we are going to be supplying liners with the food waste caddies for cover a 6-month period. And I think it's important. What we're looking at is making sure that we introduce that service with no issues, because we don't want to lose any participation from day one. So our efforts are going into making sure that is going to be our brand new service. All new collection caddies are going to be distributed early next year. We've got the round sizes and all the routes established, and we're putting that into our Bartek system for the weekly collection, and then we're going for it. So we've done the hard bit, which is designing them and making sure it fits. The next step is to bring it to life and commence collections next year.
Great. Okay, we'll see then. And Dan, any thoughts from you about liners, things like that, on the impact of round sizes?
I think again, Chris, similar to as I mentioned with the residual, yeah, where liners are issued, the RAP research shows that that participation in the service goes up, that the amount of food waste captured goes up, as has been referred to, and yeah, the rounds need to be adjusted to reflect that. It might not be universal across a local authority, and it was interesting hearing Mark talk about the range of the food waste collection rounds from previously in terms of the scale of it, and that's within one authority. So again, I would encourage council to have a look at the RAP research on this and build that into the modelling accordingly. There are other aspects as well, Chris, operationally. So whether support bins are used, which are then fixed to the back of the vehicle and tipped in. There are all these aspects that can make the rounds more efficient. But generally, where liners are used, yes, we do see an uplift in participation and yields, which does impact that size.
And just a final quick question, just around communal collections, because we've talked a lot around curbside. How should, if you were to give some advice to the audience today, what sort of key considerations there for routing of communal properties, Dan?
I would say know your communal properties, which is easier said than done sometimes. They can be very nuanced. Know where they are, know the arrangements that are in place, know how many containers will service a number of properties where they are, any restrictions to them, be it locked gates, timed collections, supervised collections, the distance needed to reverse, whether those rounds, Chris, will be dedicated or absorbed into curbside collection rounds. And really make sure that you give communal properties and others, such as narrow access rural properties, make sure you really give it fair consideration and don't assume that all the values that you're assigning to curbside properties will be mirrored across communal. They are different, and they deserve the time that's necessary to make sure that that the attributes they're going to have and how in real world you're going to collect from them are built into your rounds. So yeah, speak to providers, speak to other authorities, and understand how you're going to service communal properties is really, really important.
Great. There's a lot of those points you've mentioned came up in the communal session that we had earlier as well, and the importance of data. Any final thoughts from you, Mark, on communals?
I think it's what Dan said. Be clear in terms of how the data is represented in your data that you're going to hand off to review the rounds. The important element is to build in sufficient time for the crews, making sure that you know where they are. And some of these collections are very complex in terms of how you go about doing it. May need different vehicles, and we've had experience where we've had to look at using different vehicle sizes in certain areas because the time taken for standard refuse freighters was so significant that you have to take them out of the system to a degree. Yeah. So I think it's just important that you know where they are and they're built into your data, and have that conversation with your contractor, and they will advise you the best way of trying to configure your data with them in. Okay,
brilliant. Thanks for that insight, Mark, and for your contributions, Dan. There was a lot in the session there around data cleansing, being prepared and taking the appropriate time. I think that obviously the content that we've covered today in this broad topic areas is pretty significant because it involves, as you've heard today, a lot of experience from Mark and from Dan and what's residing within the industry. And we've only been able to go through the headlines today. So we would really encourage you to go to the Change Network Storage Hub, where all of the guidance that Dan's mentioned, all of the tools will be located, plus the video of the session, frequently asked questions, and other links you can see on the right-hand side of this slide here. We are pleased that we've partnered up with the Chartered Institute for Waste Management to provide the Storage Hub, and because of their expertise and insights and training in the waste sector. So it makes sense for the Change Network Hub to be located in their knowledge centre on the CIWM website. Any further questions that you've got following today, please forward on to us. we will compile a long list and upload into the storage hub for access in the next few days. We hope this session was really useful for you. We're going to add a feedback form into the chat section. And essentially, this is really about understanding further support that local authorities need in this space. Any information that you provide is treated confidentially and will really be used just to develop further guidance for you and for your colleagues. I think we've just posted the link in the chat, so if you wouldn't mind filling that in, that would be really appreciated. And I just wanted to thank you all for your attention today and the questions posed. It'd be great to help hear from you and to help champion today's topic content and promote this to your colleagues. Please use the Change Network by going to other sessions, promoting the topics, or just come and get involved. Get in touch using the email address that's on the page there, changenetwork@defra.gov.uk, or by contacting your representative body. So thank you, and we'll close the meeting at that point.